Gentrification has caused housing values and rent to substantially increase in the Richmond area, and lower income residents are having trouble maintaining their homes and lifestyle. Rent and housing income are two leading indicators of gentrification. Prices increasing shows the second phase of gentrification, after government intervention, property investment, and new residents moving in. Richmond has had a serious gap in availability of affordable housing for moderate and low income residents, and gentrification is only making it worse. As Richmond rejuvenates and more high income households move in, housing values rise. While rising home values could potentially benefit low income residents who decide to sell, many low income households rent rather than own their homes and may see higher taxes with increased home values. This is the same for rental costs, as landlords encounter new residents who are willing to pay a higher market rate for housing than current residents. Rental prices may increase rapidly. City data reported a wide variety of facts on the city of Richmond and estimated the median house value in 2013 was $189,200, but in 2000 it was estimated at $87,400. In the past 5 years, housing costs have increased by as much as 68% in parts of the region. Gentrification has also affected the availability and affordability of subsidized housing programs. Various policies in place to maintain adequate and affordable low-income housing in response to the new development come with lots of limitations. According to Madeline J. Barron, a graduate from Georgetown University in public policy, in a gentrifying neighborhood with rising land values and housing costs, residents in subsidized housing may be vulnerable to rising rents or declining availability due to eviction, demolition, or apartment conversion. Barron merged data from the Department of Housing and Urban Development and Census Bureau's American Community Survey for a study to compare the availability for subsidized housing to the level of gentrification in that neighborhood, and found that the association between high gentrification and a total number of subsidized units is meaningful. The results concluded that gentrified areas would have less availability in public housing units, and these public housing projects would experience the rising costs of gentrification. Lower income residents may or may not appreciate the new amenities, businesses, and redevelopment in their communities, but the effect this process has on the availability and affordability of housing for them is often negative. The third phase of gentrification captures this displacement. For people already living in these gentrifying communities, the possibility of being priced out of their homes becomes a real concern. Rapidly rising rents push even modest accommodations out of reach for low-income renters, while rising home values increase property taxes that become burdensome to low-income homeowners. 2009, the Institute for Children in Poverty examined the gentrification in 5 neighborhoods in New York and reported that though several studies suggest that low-income residents are not experiencing massive displacement because of gentrification, but actually benefit from the influx of the capital to the area. They neglect those individuals and families who are already precariously housed, who face eviction or reside doubled up with friends or relatives and live on the brink of homelessness. Gentrification has caused a huge gap in income inequality between residents in Richmond, isolating the poor and adding new transformations for the wealthier residents moving in. Mindy Alt, a research assistant at NHC's Center for Housing Policy, says this correlates with the vast majority of extremely low-income households having severe housing cost burdens. These households include many workers who serve local communities in minimum wage positions. Nearly 8 in 10 extremely low-income working households were severely housing cost burdened in 2013. Huge percentage difference between 78.9% of extremely low-income households having severe housing cost burdens to 11.4% low-income households to 3.6% of moderate-income households. Meanwhile, these new wealthier residents are moving into the new gentrified spots in Richmond and causing housing values to skyrocket and making the median income increase as well. In a podcast by NPR News called Gentrification, Progress or Destruction, Lisa Sturdivant states income is the real driver of gentrification. Lower-income residents feel like new investors and these new homeowners are leaving them out or in some cases pushing them out of an improving economic picture. City data reported a wide variety of facts on the city of Richmond and estimated the median household income in 2013 was $39,193, but over 18% of households earn less than $15,000 in income. This correlates with housing values and rent skyrocketing because wealthier residents are moving in, causing the median income to increase. Sasha Abramsky, a writer for The Nation, reminds readers that today Richmond remains a deeply unequal city, with some neighborhoods in the throes of gentrification and others subtly desolate in the destitution. While new transformations are happening in spots of Richmond, the East End specifically still holds most of the city's public housing projects. This is concentrated poverty. Tina Grego, a reporter at Washington Post, states Creighton Court, just 15 minutes away from here, is the best example of showing the gap in income and living within the city. Creighton Court is the poorest census tract in the city, with a poverty rate of 69.6% and an unemployment rate of 22.7%. Most residents are women and kids, and they live on average annual incomes of roughly $8,500 a year. These extremely low-income residents cannot afford these new transformations in their neighborhood, and that's why there is more displacement happening. Gentrification is also causing inequality between homeowners and renters, specifically affecting lower-income neighborhoods the hardest with housing costs. Rising rent is so significant to lower-income homeowners because a large majority of these residents rent instead of own their homes. Mindy Alt, in her research for housing policy, says in fact renters face steady rise in housing costs, while owners have benefited from falling housing costs. These lower-income renters are being hit the hardest with housing costs. This creates a very unequal relationship between homeowners and renters. This is very significant because between 2010 and 2013, the number of working owners decreased by more than 4%, while the number of working renters increased by 5.6% during that time. Here, Richmond is taking advantage of home renters and challenging affordable housing for a large group of residents. Gentrification, rising rents, limited or declining supply of affordable homes, and flat or declining incomes all come together to paint a troubling picture of the housing situation of many low-income households. While new groups of people are moving into the gentrified areas of Richmond, the city neglects opportunity and culture for the lower-income communities. Gentrification is causing extremely low-income neighborhoods to remain and continue to live in poverty. Tina Grego included the Map of Opportunity, a project done by Koziol, the Director of Research for Housing Opportunities Made Equal of Virginia, Inc., which includes a map showing which neighborhoods in Richmond best position their residents for future opportunity. These maps show the areas of low opportunity correlate with the areas of high poverty. This hints that gentrification is part of a racial issue. Change in the racial composition of a neighborhood frequently accompanies the gentrification process. The Institute for Child and Poverty, an independent nonprofit research that studies the impact of poverty on family and child well-being, says often higher-income households of one ethnic or racial background move into lower-income neighborhoods populated by another group. An influx of white population has occurred in the gentrified areas of Richmond. Education is another indicator of gentrification, in which these newest in-movers often have higher levels of education than the current residents of a neighborhood. These new residents come in with higher income and education level and bring a different culture and contrast to older Richmond residents. Lower-income communities in Richmond do not have a good school system, but the city is trying to restructure into smaller schools and attract higher-income movers. The Institute for Children in Poverty studied the percent change in racial composition for 3 New York neighborhoods and found Canarsie has undergone the most significant shift in racial composition. Once an overwhelmingly white community, Canarsie is now a majority black neighborhood. In 1990, merely 20% of the population was black. Today, almost 2/3 of Canarsie's residents are black and represent a 204% increase in just 16 years. When an influx of new residents move into a community, there is additionally a cultural shift in the area, causing long-term residents to not only be pushed out of their homes, but also to lose the culture their neighborhood was once known for. Long-term residents have been used to the culture and look of their community, and these new movers bring in more restaurants, stores, and small coffee shops. These long-term residents have no control. Overall, Richmond has been such a selling point for movers because of its convenient location to education, transportation, food, and attractions.